House, all ambassadors, all government officials, all dignitaries that are in the House, all protocol observed, you are all welcome, and thank you for coming into this special event of Palestine. Today we are here to recognize and to remember this very important day, which has been taking place for over 43 years, that the UN has recognized internationally the solidarity of Palestine. It is an important day in South Africa to remember the Palestinians, because we know where we are coming from as South Africans. Prior to where we are today, we have been in the similar, very most similar situation as Palestinians. But today, South Africa is able to stand up and say we are free. And it is also because of the international world that has been with us. We therefore are grateful to Ambassador Hannah and to the UN to make sure that this day, today in South Africa, it is recognized, and we have, as Africa at large, sitting here today to remember and show our solidarity to the Palestinians and to tell them that they are not alone. And in all of that, we are not only going to be talking only within South Africa, but we'll be talking outside of South Africa. As we have Lesotho, we have other countries in Africa who are supporting what Palestine is going through, who are making sure that one day Palestine will be standing like South Africa and say they are free. And we hope to see that in our living days. With that being said, I would love us to all stand up and recognize and sing and hear the national anthem from the State of Palestine, and it will be followed by one of the Republic of South Africa. Sorry. Thank you. Her Excellency Hanan Jara is the very first female Palestinian ambassador to South Africa. In all the past years, we haven't been graced to have a female ambassador, especially from Palestine. Knowing, especially now, I'm glad that we are talking about gender-based violence, and today we will be embraced by a female ambassador from Palestine who will give us a short message from the Palestinians themselves, who will be talking to us and reminding us why we are here today, who will be also putting some pressure on the South Africans, on the southern part of Africa, in terms of where we are as people with the Palestinian solidarity. Ambassador Hanan Jara, please join us on stage. I don't know.
I think this is good. Sabah al-khair, good morning, and thank you for the nice introduction and for the reception also. His Excellency Mr. Alvin Moody's, Deputy Minister of DERCO, His Excellency Mr. Mofo Mobi, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations of the Kingdom of Lesotho, His Excellency Mr. Mubarak Zakwani, Ambassador of Oman, Dean of the Arab Ambassadors, Comrade Mohammed Isai, Director General of Africa for Palestine, Rev. Frank Shikani, World Council of Churches and former DG in the Presidency of South Africa, colleague ambassadors, high commissioners, government officials, members of the media, distinguished delegates present, members of the diplomatic corps, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It gives me great pleasure to meet and speak to you all in South Africa. A land characterized by the Isizulu expression, Ubuntu, Ubuntu, Gabantu. This is one of my favorite South African phrases that I have learned since I came into South Africa at the beginning of this year. It means a person is a person through other people. I am because you are. This idea of a communal humanity guided the liberation struggle against apartheid, South African liberation movement support of other oppressed people, and also South Africa's international relations since 1994. For us Palestinians, nowhere is this more visible than in the legacy of Nelson Mandela, who said that South Africa will not be free until Palestine is free. I address you on the occasion of the UN International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, which is commemorated every year on the 29th of November. November is a month of painful anniversaries for the Palestinian people. 103 years ago, this month, Arthur Balfour, with the stroke of a colonial pen, declared Palestine as a Jewish homeland, thus beginning the Zionist colonial onslaught on our land. On November the 29th, 1947, the newly created UN at that time imposed on Palestinians an unjust partition plan that allocated over 56% of our land, along with our key agricultural lands, cities, and seaports, to newly arrived Zionist settlers. Indigenous Palestinian concerns about the disproportionate allocation of land were simply ignored, and the Israeli state was violently born, as over 750,000 Palestinians were uprooted from their homeland and scattered all over the world in refuge. 73 years later, we remain without a state. The UN Day of International Solidarity with the Palestinian people is a stark reminder to the world that Israel's occupation of Palestine continues and that the Palestinian people have yet to attain their state. We remain trapped in a non-state with no rights, land, or citizenship. Let me take this opportunity to thank our partners, as always, the South African Department of International Relations and Cooperation, the Department of Arts and Culture, and the United Nations Office in South Africa, for organizing various events commemorating the International Solidarity Day with the Palestinian people. I would like also to thank the various solidarity groups and committees in South Africa for their support, especially Africa for Palestine. Dear representatives of African governments, dear ambassadors, your presence here today reflects the deeply rooted bonds between our own liberation and anti-colonial struggle in Africa and that of the Palestinian people. The struggle of Africans against colonization and domination, whether it was the Front for the Liberation of Mozambique, the African National Congress of South Africa, the People's Movements for Liberation of Angola, Zimbabwe African People's Union, the Southwest African People Organization, or the Tanganyika African National Union in Tanzania, is also the struggle of the Palestinian people against the Israeli colonization and occupation of Palestine. Ours is a shared struggle, and there is a deep-seated historic solidarity between the people of Africa and Palestine. In fact, an icon African decolonization and freedom, Melemo Nyerere, was among the first African leaders to recognize the Palestine Liberation Organization under the late Yasser Arafat. And in 1973, Dar es Salaam became home to the first PLO embassy in Africa. In 1988, 33 African countries officially recognized Palestine after late Yasser Arafat proclaimed our independence from Algeria. Decades before Palestine has launched its 2011 stated bid at the UN, African countries already recognized the state of Palestine. The issue of Palestine was high on the agenda of the Organization of African Unity, the predecessor of the current African Union. Resolution number 77 of the meeting of the heads of states and government of the Organization of African Unity held in Uganda between 28 July and the 1st of August 1975 declared, the racist Israeli regime in occupied Palestine and the racist regime in Zimbabwe and South Africa have a common imperialist origin, forming a whole and having the same racist structure and being organically linked in their policy aimed at oppression of the dignity and integrity of a human being. It was because of this Organization of African Unity resolution that the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 3379 in November 1975 that declared Zionism as a form of racist and racial discrimination. Dear ambassadors, it was also through the efforts of African countries and other nations from the global south that UN General Assembly established the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People in 1975. Guinea, Madagascar, Mali, Namibia, Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, South Africa, and Tunisia currently serve on the committee. Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Mauritania, Morocco, Niger, and the African Union are observers. African countries have continued the legacy of supporting Palestine at the UN. At the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, the African group, who represent almost a third of all UN members, have constantly reminded the UN Human Rights Council of its obligation to act immediately to ensure that the Palestinian people are able to realize their right to self-determination, justice, and freedom. Speaking at the general debate on Item 7 of the UN Human Rights Council agenda. Item 7 is a human rights situation in Palestine and other Arab-occupied territories. Africa has loudly and systematically called on the world to act urgently to end Israel's military occupation of Palestine. Just 10 days ago, at the UN General Assembly vote, not a single African nation endorsed Israeli annexation of Jerusalem and the West Bank. In doing so, they resolved not to treat the illegal settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem as part of Israel, and called on Israel to recognize the Palestinian sovereign rights to the natural resources of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and not to exploit the natural resources of these areas. African nations continue to stand with Palestine and condemn Israel's occupation of it. Despite the efforts of the Israeli government to use aid and technology to negate their long-standing positions at the UN and the African Union on the Israeli occupation of Palestine that are in line with the international law. African nations continue to stand in solidarity with Palestine at the international forums, despite attempts to separate Africa's own decolonization and liberation history from the anti-colonial struggle and resistance of the Palestinian people. Particularly at the international forums, you have not allowed the anti-colonial nature of the Palestinian cause and liberation struggle to be erased and replaced with a divisive religious discourse. Dear friends, Israel's occupation has not defeated the Palestinian people, and we remain innovative with much to offer our friends in the global south, especially in Africa. In 2016, President Mahmoud Abbas established the Palestinian International Cooperation Agency, we call it PICA, as the development cooperation arm of Palestinian foreign policy. PICA transfers Palestinian know-how to developing countries in the form of technical assistance. Its creation is guided by three words: solidarity through development. PICA is an expression of gratitude and appreciation of support and solidarity given to Palestine over the years. It is worth mentioning here that PICA has already started implementing development projects in the African continent, particularly in South Africa, Lesotho, Namibia, Senegal, Mali, and Ivory Coast, and will continue implementing different development and technical projects in Malawi, Swatini, and Botswana upon demand, especially in the fields of agriculture, health, water, and energy. Our aid, dear friends, requires no diplomatic repayment at the UN or the African Union. If Palestinians can do this while under occupation, imagine what is possible if we were free. And in the spirit and the context of solidarity and the importance of international solidarity, we, the Palestinian people, commend and join in solidarity with South African President, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, in the late 5 days of national mourning for all those who lost their lives to the global COVID-19 pandemic. Our flag at the Palestinian embassy flew half-mast for 5 days in a symbol of solidarity and recognition of the importance of international solidarity. Let's come to the current situation. What is the Palestinian situation right now? As we look to the future, the reality of a two-state solution is not impossible. It's still visible, viable. What is needed, first and foremost, are the leadership and the political will. The efforts of civil society and those on all sides who seek to bridge the gap between Israelis and Palestinians also need to be supported. One effective step that the international community can take is to recognize the state of Palestine on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as a capital, and support Palestine diplomatic initiatives such as the UN Security Council resolution to put an end to the Israeli occupation, as well as our access to international treaties and organizations. Despite decades of disappointment and setbacks, we remain committed to a multilateral order that respects and ensures the respect of international law. We invite the international community to send more observers and fact-finding missions to the occupied territory. Despite COVID-19 lockdown regulations, they will see how Israeli settlements on Palestinian land continue to expand and how the attacks by the soldiers on Palestinian communities continue unchecked. I began my speech by quoting Nelson Mandela, and I want to end off by quoting Mwalimu Nyerere, Tanzania, when he said, "Our generation was a generation of national struggle for the independence of our own countries. But the plight of the Palestinians is very different and much worse. They have been deprived of their own country. They are a nation without a land of their own. They therefore deserve the support of Tanzania and the entire world." We Palestinians are inspired by Africa's liberation struggle and its former leaders. As such, we urge you not to veer from your legacies of fighting for global justice and to continue supporting the occupied and colonized people of Palestine. We are yet to attain our inalienable rights to self-determination and still to achieve our liberation. Our decolonization journey is not yet begun. But 103 years after the Balfour Declaration, 73 years after the occupation of Palestine and Nakba in 1948, 53 years after the Israeli occupation of the rest of Palestine, which includes West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza, 13 years of an inhumane siege on Gaza, we Palestinians are still there, here, as determined as ever to achieve our freedom, just you did. Africa's solidarity, along with the rest of the Global South, is a vital pillar in our struggle against colonization and occupation. And we hope that through international cooperation and development, you will ensure that justice for Palestine is achieved. Thank you so much for your coming here today. Your presence is a gesture that the issue of Palestine is still alive in the hearts and the minds of all of us. Thank you. Shukran.
Thank you very much. Okay. Technology is doing its own things. Thank you very much, Her Excellency. Very true. As we are not free in South Africa, Palestine is still not yet free. But I believe today it's only not South Africa that is still not only free, but Africa as a whole will not be free until Palestine is free. Different resolutions have been taken, as we have all heard from Her Excellency, and I believe we all know that, but it's still not enough. There is a lot that still needs to be done. And true, nothing is better than to be in the region in Palestine and to see for yourself what a Palestinian life is like. The same as Her Excellency has challenged us to send more observers to the region. I reiterate on the same words. Go to the region, see for yourself what a true Palestinian life is like. In the next thing, we'll show you a short film on Palestine International Cooperation Agency. This is just to give us a short script of what it's like to be in Palestine. It's just a 5 minutes thing. Thank you.
Sorry, man. So if you can just switch it on again.
Thank you. Her Excellency, Ms. Nardos Bekele, I hope I pronounce it right?
Yes.
Thank you. She has served as a resident coordinator and UNDP resident representative in Kenya, as well as in the Republic of Benin. She is a member of the group of African eminent women, also a recipient of the prestigious AU Award of 2015, Women of Excellence. Currently, she is the resident of the United Nations and resident representative of UNDP here in South Africa. We welcome you here and we are pleased to have you. Please come on stage and to give us a short of your message from the UN based on the International Day of Palestine.
Your Excellency Ms. Hanan Jarar, the Ambassador of the State of Palestine, Your Excellency, my brother, the Deputy Minister of DERCO, Mr. Alvin Botes, good to have you here. Your Excellency, Mr. Mubarak bin Salem Al Zakwani, Ambassador of the Sultanate of Oman, Your Excellency, Mr. Majesta Mufombe, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations of the Kingdom of Lesotho, Reverend Frank Chikane, World Council of Churches, Mr. J.C. Durate, I haven't seen her. She's not here. Yeah. In absentia then, the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC, Mr. Mohammed Desai, Director General of Africa for Palestine. I see so many friends and colleagues from the diplomatic corps. I say good morning to all of you. It's so good to see you physically after such a long time. I thought I had forgotten even the faces of people, but I still remember, I see the ambassador of Jordan here. I see Lebanon here. I see my sister from Tunisia. Over there, I see my sister from Botswana. I think, many of you who are there, oh my goodness, I cannot name. It's packed. So, I just say all of my friends and colleagues and family of the diplomatic corps, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to be here with you today to commemorate the International Day for Solidarity with the Palestinian people. I am here to deliver the statement by the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, to mark this important day for all people who yearn for lasting peace and stability in the Middle East. But before I read the Secretary General's statement, allow me to make some brief remarks. We are gathered here today to express our strong support and solidarity with the people of Palestine. It's a challenge that we continue grappling with more than 70 years after the United Nations accepted the responsibility to find a just and fair solution to the Palestinian issue. Today's commemoration, however, is yet again a sad reminder of the unfinished work that still confronts us. Every day, Palestinian people bear the brunt of a conflict that had a direct bearing on the daily lives, even as they continue, like every one of us, to struggle to overcome the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. As Secretary General Antonio Guterres continues to remind us, resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains one of the most intractable challenges facing the international community. On Wednesday, 2nd December, the UN General Assembly will convene for its annual debates on the question of Palestine, where it is expected to adopt a series of resolutions, including on the parameters for a just solution to this outstanding question. Because we have gone for so long without finding a solution, should not be a reason to lose hope. We should remain committed to a solution that will bring peace based on the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms for the Palestinian people. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now deliver the Secretary General's statement, and I quote, "As the United Nations marks its 75th anniversary, the question of Palestine remains distressingly unresolved. The COVID-19 pandemic has decimated the Palestinian economy and undermined the already fragile humanitarian, economic, and political situation in Gaza, further entrenched by crippling restrictions of movements and access. Meanwhile, prospects for a viable two-state solutions are growing more distant. A host of factors continue to cause great misery, including the expansion of illegal settlements, a significant spike in the demolition of Palestinian homes and structures, violence, and continued militant activity. Israeli and Palestinian leaders have a responsibility to explore every opening to restore hope and achieve a two-state solution. I remain committed to supporting Palestinians and Israelis to resolve the conflict and the occupation in line with the relevant UN resolutions, international law, and bilateral agreements in pursuit of the vision of two states, Israel and an independent and democratic, contiguous and sovereign Palestine, living side by side in peace and security within secure and recognized borders on the basis of the pre-1967 borders, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states. I hope that recent developments will encourage Palestinian and Israeli leaders to re-engage in meaningful negotiations and with the support of the international community, and will create opportunities for regional cooperation. We must also do all we can to ease the suffering of the Palestinian people. I am extremely concerned by the financial situation facing UNRWA. The agency plays an essential role as the main provider of direct and often life-saving assistance to many of the 5.7 million Palestinian refugees. I appeal to all member states to urgently contribute to enable UNRWA to meet the critical humanitarian and development needs of Palestinian refugees during the pandemic. On this International Day of Solidarity, I also extend my heartfelt condolences on the tragic passing of Dr. Saeed Erekat, Palestinian Liberation Organization Secretary General and Chief Negotiator for Palestinians in the Middle East peace process, unquote. And with this, I conclude my remarks. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Madam.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It was an important message to get, especially from you, and as this is a special day, as we recognize the 43rd year recognizing the International Day of Palestine from the UN. With that being said, Mr. Tisai, in his young years, he chose to move away from his peers and came to the arena of the activists. Started early to speak against the occupation of Palestine by apartheid Israel. Africa Palestine, as an organization, prides itself to be led by this young activist, Mohamed Desai. Please come share with us your message today.
I guess there's no mandlas today. I'd like it to be acknowledged that I'm wearing formal shoes. I think that what's important for us as Africa for Palestine is the spirit of internationalism and international solidarity that brings us to stand with the people of Palestine. We have no particular biological or other reason to stand with the Palestinians, but for us, it's really that spirit of Sam Nujoma of Namibia, the spirit of Samora Machel of Mozambique, the spirit of Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, the spirit of Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, the spirit of Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso. It's the spirit of Fidel Castro. It's the spirit of Leila Khaled that brings us here together. And in order to extract the spirit of international solidarity, which drives us members of civil society to stand with oppressed nations, be it the people of Palestine, the people of Cuba or elsewhere, I'd like to share just a very quick story of Rosa Parks, the woman, the famous woman of the civil rights movement, the African-American woman who refused to get off a black-only, to get off the whites-only section of a bus in the south of the United States. Rosa Parks was spotted outside the apartheid embassy, outside the South African embassy of apartheid South Africa during the 1980s. She was there seen protesting against apartheid South Africa. And journalists went up to her to ask her, but why are you protesting against something that is thousands of kilometers away on a completely different continent for a people that you have never met? And Rosa Parks responded that you can chew bubble gum and you can walk at the same time, that you can pursue your local struggles, and at the same time, it's about finding the capacity to stand in solidarity with other oppressed nations of the world. And this is the spirit of the organization that I belong to. And it's an organization which I think that we must thank the Embassy of Palestine, specifically in South Africa, but also the Department of International Relations and Cooperation in our country, where it's our own government that ensures that civil society works in tandem with both our political organizations, but also with our government. And so it is this spirit of internationalism, it's this nature of an organization that we are hoping to have engagements with the ambassadors that are here, together with representatives from the embassy, as to how do we encourage, as to how do we see a furthering of this spirit of internationalism and international solidarity that was really the bedrock of the foundation of many of our African states. And so we do hope that after today's program, after today's seminar, this is a discussion that we can take forward with the various African embassies that are present, but also with the Arab embassies that are present. Our organization, Africa for Palestine, was transformed from a previous organization called BDS, South Africa. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement was called for by the Palestinian people in 2005. And in the last decade or so of its existence, it has achieved major and significant victories. You have the Dutch pension fund, the Swedish pension fund, the Norwegian pension fund, the second largest such pension fund in the world, that have all divested from Israeli companies or Israeli-linked corporations. You also have, for example, within the church arena, you have the United Congregational Church of Southern Africa with just over 500,000 members. You have the Methodist Church of Southern Africa with 2.5 million members. The Anglican Church of Southern Africa with more than 4.5 million members. You have the World Communion of Reformed Churches, which the South African Council of Churches does have members that are part of it. The World Communion of Reformed Churches with over 50 million members that have adopted various forms of boycotts against the Israeli regime. The United Nations reported just a few years ago as to how Israel has lost 46% in foreign direct investment as a direct consequence of the international boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. So to those ambassadors that are here, if you don't give us meetings, we will have severe consequences. But in all honesty, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement has proven to be a non-violent strategy that has been able to hold Israel accountable. And we are hoping that through engagements with yourselves, we can actually pursue public awareness, but also international solidarity within civil society of various African countries. We were fortunate to have engaged with Comrade Kenneth Kaunda last year in Zambia, where we have been told that some of the former liberation movements are specifically areas where we would like to develop relations in addition to other spaces within civil society. The one sad moment of 2020 for many of us that are involved in international solidarity was the passing of a United Nations giant. That giant that we are speaking about, if there's ever a foreign national that probably knows more about Southern Africa and Africa in general than any African person, then it's most undoubtedly have to be the diplomat, Dr. E.S. Reddy. Dr. E.S. Reddy was at the forefront of the international anti-apartheid movement, specifically within the United Nations. And this is something that we would like to lobby the United Nations, both in our own country, but also internationally speaking, that Dr. E.S. Reddy was the director of the anti-apartheid, of the UN Special Committee Against Apartheid. And we would like to see, together with the Palestinian embassy, we would like to see the re-establishment of such a committee to deal with the crimes of apartheid that are being committed by the Israeli regime. And we don't mention the word apartheid, by the way, out of an emotional space, or because it sounds like like propaganda. But we use the word apartheid because Israeli human rights organizations have listed just over 46 discriminatory laws that the Israeli regime is violating. We also recall that the United Nations released a report by a Lebanese diplomat, documenting how Israel is committing the crime of apartheid. Of course, after US and Israeli pressures, the report was squashed. And so in many ways, we want to see the establishment of the UN Committee Against Apartheid at national level, but we also want to see the African Union moving more solidly on the Palestinian issue. This is an engagement that we want to have. Which I just like to end on, we often quote just one paragraph of Samora Machel. Samora Machel being really one of the fathers of international solidarity on our continent. So I'd just like to quote just one paragraph above the normal paragraph that we use when we speak about Samora Machel. Samora Machel has said that solidarity is an assertion that no people is alone. No people is isolated in the struggle for progress. Solidarity is a conscious alliance of the progressive and peace-loving revolutionary forces against exploitation of human by human. Solidarity has no race and has no color, and its country has no frontiers. There is no solidarity just among Africans, no exclusively Asian solidarity, since the enemy of the people also has no race and no color and no country. And so it is in this spirit of international solidarity that we are standing with the Palestinian people, a people, by the way, that long before it was fashionable, long before it was sexy, it was the Palestinians that gave us military training, that gave us financial support and various other forms of solidarity, not just in the South African struggle, but in our various struggles on the African continent. And so when we come to mark the UN International Day of Solidarity with the people of Palestine, we're not doing it as a charity, we're not doing it as a favor to the Palestinians, but we're doing it as a commitment to our higher duty of internationalism and of international solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Always speaking with confidence and charisma and young blood showing out of you. With that being said, the Deputy Minister, His Excellency Alvin Boats, is Minister of International Relations in South Africa and a member of the South African, or rather of the African National Congress. He has never shied away from speaking against the occupation of Palestine. In different spaces, he has stood firm as a person and a child of the ANC to show solidarity with Palestine. Deputy Minister, please come share your solidarity message.
Thank you very much, Ambassador of the State of Palestine in our house, Ambassador Jara. Our special guest today, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations of the Kingdom of Lesotho, Excellency Mr. Mofumowi. Our Excellency Ambassador of the Sultanate of Oman, who is also the Dean of the Arab Ambassadors, Your Excellency Al-Zawakani, Ambassadors, Your Excellencies, High Commissioners representing the continent of Africa and the Middle East, United Nations Resident Coordinator, Madam Bekele Thomas, the Reverend Shikani from the World Council of Churches and the former Director General of the South African Republic, the young lion of the South, the DG of African for Palestine, Comrade Desai, ladies and gentlemen. It is my singular honor and privilege to address this commemoration of the 43rd International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. A wise man once said, ladies and gentlemen, that we make history not out of circumstances of our own choosing. However, we have engagement with a future that is predictable, that is certain, and that is prosperous for South Africa that we want in 2030. And that future that is prosperous, ladies and gentlemen, is a mirror image of the future for the Africa that we want in 2063, which speaks about inclusive prosperity. And therefore, the wise man once again reminds us, ladies and gentlemen, that the role of philosophers is to interpret the world, and our responsibility is to change the world. South Africa's national interest displays a people-centered, progressive and developmental outlook, as evidenced in our foreign policy imperatives and the execution thereof. And what is key and critical, ladies and gentlemen, in that foreign policy execution is our Pan-Africanism, our global solidarity, in particular with the South, North-to-North cooperation, and of course, centrality of multilateralism. It is my submission that South Africa has been universally acclaimed for our role as a country which earned the sight of the vulnerable. It therefore holds, ladies and gentlemen, should we leapfrog to a prosperous Africa in 2063, it must be impinned by our value proposition to regard multilateralism as central to our task at hand and to frown upon unilateralism. We are commemorating, ladies and gentlemen, the 25th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Human, convened in Beijing in 1995. And as South Africa is experiencing some of the most horrific incidents as it relates to gender-based violence and femicide, we have obligation, firstly as men of this continent and the world, to acknowledge, ladies and gentlemen, that a preemptive presence of masculinity has no place in our society. Our thematic approach as it relates to the 16 days of no violence against women and children is informed by our approach to realize financial and economic justice for all women. As we gathered here, ladies and gentlemen, we are also evidently conscious about the fact that we are also confronted by a different pandemic that is transnational in nature, that straddles both states and nations, the COVID-19 pandemic. The devastating impact of the coronavirus, ladies and gentlemen, has forced us to realize the vital centrality to cherish the apex institution of multilateralism, the United Nations, and the sister agencies. Please allow me at this juncture an opportunity to pay respect to all those who have lost their life as regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. In particular, ladies and gentlemen, the recent passing of Dr. Saeed Erekat, a prominent, elite Palestine peace negotiator, and a proponent of people's struggle. Ladies and gentlemen, whilst the world are confronted with this COVID-19 pandemic, Israel is exploiting the situation to escalate violence and to increase violations in its settlement, colonialization, and annexation schemes by continuing to abolish and confiscate Palestine-owned structures and homes in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and thereby entrenching its military occupation. Earlier in October, ladies and gentlemen, it was announced by the Israeli authorities that they are going to advance on the quest to construct 5,000 new housing units in the occupied West Bank. And this marks 2020 as the year for the highest settlement expansion since 2012. It therefore holds, ladies and gentlemen, that the temptation of Israel to want to annex the entirety of the West Bank territory with the support of the Trump administration could only be negated by ensuring that we use 2020 as the year to ensure that we have a more strengthened United Nations that are able to conform and uphold the highest standards of multilateralism in the world order. We are also conscious about the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that 3 years to today, the Trump administration recognized Jerusalem as being the undivided capital of Israel, and in May 2018 moved the US Embassy there, annex key disputed parts of the Golan Heights, ramp up illegal settlements, while simultaneously, ladies and gentlemen, and unfortunately, withholding much needed humanitarian aid and withdrawing aid from a very prestigious UN agency, UNRWA. In a very radical and unfortunate shift by some Arab nations, 3 countries, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Sudan, have taken very unfortunate steps in the recent months towards normalizing relationships with the state of Israel. The prevailing formula, ladies and gentlemen, as outlined in the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, was that normalization will be granted to the state of Israel only and in return for making meaningful political compromises with the people of Palestine. Excellencies, the Middle East peace process is at a stalemate, and though there has been several proposals to reach a peace agreement between Israel and Palestine prior to 2014, the ongoing conflict has defied all and every international commitments made by the United Nations. South Africa is of view, ladies and gentlemen, that the Madrid Principles, the Arab Peace Plan, the Geneva Initiative, the Quartet Roadmap, and the Paris International Peace Conference is a myriad of necessary policy considerations that would ultimately lead to a two-state solution. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand unflinching on the side of the most vulnerable of society, and in this instance, and in particular, the state of Israel. At our multilateral gatherings, as a chair of the African Union, and as the president in December of this year of the United Nations Security Council, in our capacity as a prominent member of the non-aligned movement, a member of the Organization of African Caribbean Pacific States, the old ACP, and of the G77, we have consistently, ladies and gentlemen, ensured that we have a consistent voting conduct and behavior, and that we are consistently regarded as the voice of the hopeless and the voice of the helpless in this plethora of multilateral organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, in August 2012, the South African government approved a government notice entitled 379 pertaining to the labeling of products from the occupied Palestine territories. And that has resulted in the state of Israel being profoundly distressed by the fact that the entirety of the South African cabinet, unanimous in its consensus, has approved a notice requiring the labeling of products emanating from the occupied territories. South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, has appointed presidential envoys who have visited several countries in the region and interacted with the leaders and opinion makers, soliciting the views of how the noble cause of a two-state solution could be advanced. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, on the 14th of May 2018, the South African government, through its cabinet, have recalled our former ambassador to Israel to protest the ongoing and unrelenting killings of hundreds of unarmed protesters taking part in the Great March of Return in the besieged Gaza. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, in 2019, the South African government began to actively downgrade its ties with the state of Israel in an unprecedented step, which goes against the current international trend of shielding Israel and protecting it from repercussions for its unfortunate policies and its disfranchisement of millions of Palestinian people. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, President Ramaphosa holds high hope that the change in administration in the United States of America will bring about a possibility for renewed effort to find a lasting solution as it relates to the Israeli-Palestine conflict. It is our submission today, ladies and gentlemen, that the idea presented by the Palestine ambassador, Palestine President Abbas, to hold an international peace conference in early 2021 appears to gain traction. South Africa therefore fully and unequivocally supports this call for an international conference with the participation of all concerned parties, particularly the Palestine people. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, let me validate and amplify and underpin what is the foreign policy outlook of South Africa as it relates to the plight of the Palestine people. One is that we'll continue to work with all like-minded countries to support international efforts aimed at the establishment of a viable, prosperous, secure Palestine state existing side by side in peace and harmony with the state of Israel within international recognized borders based on the existing of those on 4th June 1967 with East Jerusalem, ladies and gentlemen, as its capital, in line with all relevant United Nations resolutions, international law, and internationally agreed parameters. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we wish you well in this very auspicious occasion. And remember what the wise man said, that we make history not in circumstances of our own choosing, and that our responsibility, unlike the philosophers, is not to interpret the world, but to change it. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Deputy Minister Alvin Bowles. Normalizing the occupation of Palestine is not and will not be correct. We thank the South African government to stay and stick to their ways of sticking with the Palestinian people and making sure that Palestine will be free as South Africa is now free. With that being said, two giants met once and they stood firm for their countries and shared ideas of their concerns, as well as their struggles. When these two giants met, they looked at each other in the eyes and they hugged and they shared with each other a kafir. I'm talking here none other than the late two presidents, Arafat and Nelson Mandela. Let us watch a short clip, a 5-minute short clip of their meeting and how they shared their smiles and their struggles.
إنه لشرف لي أن أحيي أخا ورفيقا في النضال من أجل الحرية ووطنيا محبا لوطنه. كلمات قالها نيلسون مانديلا في إحدى المناسبات عن ياسر عرفات، ونقولها اليوم في مؤسسة ياسر عرفات: إنه لشرف كبير لنا أن نساهم مع شعبنا الفلسطيني وشعوب العالم في الذكرى المئوية الأولى لميلاد ذلك العملاق القائد الملهم والإنسان العظيم نيلسون مانديلا. لقد كرس حياته كلها لقيادة النضال الشعبي، ومثل روح الشعب الذي لا يقهر. وقف شامخا وبشجاعة نادرة في مواجهة أدق الاختبارات التي يمكن لمناضل من أجل الحرية أن يواجهها. لم يكن محاربا عظيما في ساحة المعركة فقط، وإنما أيضا رجل دولة عظيما في البحث عن السلام. يلتبس الأمر هنا، هل نتحدث عن ياسر عرفات أم عن نيلسون مانديلا؟
I greet you all in the name of peace, democracy and freedom for all. I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people. Today, the majority of South Africans, black and white, recognize that apartheid has no future.
وقد جمعتهما قائمة شرف واحدة: جمال عبد الناصر، هواري بومدين، فيديل كاسترو، جوزيف تيتو، المهاتما غاندي، نيلسون مانديلا. وجمعتهم قصة كفاح وتضامن ودعم مبدئي متبادل، وتمتعا بصفات عديدة مشتركة جعلت منهما رمزين مميزين من رموز النضال الفريدة في النصف الثاني من القرن العشرين. كان نيلسون مانديلا ملهما لحركات التحرر العالمية، أيقونة نضال وشعلة أمل وحيوية، بطلا منذ نعومة أظفاره وفي شبابه وفي سنوات سجنه الطويلة وكفاحه الصلب لتحرير شعبه.
Choose peace rather than confrontation, except in cases where we cannot proceed, where we cannot move forward. Then, if the only alternative is violence, we will use violence.
كان عرفات أول المهنئين لمانديلا يوم خروجه من السجن، وفي حديثه حينها كان عملاقا تحرريا يتحدث إلى عملاق آخر من عمالقة التحرر الوطني والنضال ضد التفرقة العنصرية والاحتلال. ولطالما شبه الكثيرون كيان الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بنظام التمييز العنصري في جنوب إفريقيا قبل أن ينهار ويختفي. في كل لقاء بينهما منذ اللقاء الأول في لوساكا عاصمة زامبيا يوم 15 من فبراير عام 1990 بعد خروج مانديلا من سنوات السجن 27 والتي لم تنفك عرفات خلالها عن التواصل معه ومع عائلته إلى اللقاءات العديدة التي جمعتهما بعد ذلك. كانت مشاهد الود والتقدير وتشارك الأهداف النبيلة السامية تفرض نفسها فيراها العالم كله. لقاء عملاق لكل منهما حكاية فداء وبطولة ومجد. إن الشعب الفلسطيني يقيم كل التقدير والاحترام لنضال شعب جنوب إفريقيا ودعمه للحقوق المشروعة للشعب الفلسطيني وكافة شعوب العالم، تماما كما هو حال الشرفاء في كل العالم متضامنين مع الشعب الذي يقاوم ويقاتل لأجل حريته وتقرير مصيره وانعتاقه من الاحتلال الإسرائيلي.
He was an icon in the Protestants of the world. He was not only concerned with the liberation of the Arab people, but of all the oppressed people throughout the world, Arabs and non-Arabs. And to lose a man of that stature and thinking is a great blow to all those who are fighting against oppression. We regret that. And we give our condolences to his family and to the Arab people to which he belongs.
سوف يبقى نيلسون مانديلا إلى الأبد رمزا للبطولة والتضحية، نبعا صافيا يستقي منه كل متعطش للعدالة والحرية، وقصة إنسانية رائعة تتعلم منها الأجيال دروسا لا تنتهي.
Indeed, apartheid has no future. The two were and still are a beacon of hope. The statue of Nelson Mandela stands tall in Ramallah as a true revelation of his commitment towards the freedom of Palestine. His Excellency Ambassador Mubarak Al-Zakwani of the Sultanate of Oman, who is also the Dean of the Arab Ambassadors, today His Excellency will share with us their support and solidarity towards the Palestinian. His Excellency.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Deputy Ministers, Excellencies, Excellency Hanan Jarrar, ladies and gentlemen, with all protocol observed, I am very pleased to be able to welcome all of you, Your Excellencies. I want to give my thanks to those who organized the solidarity event with the Palestinian people and their just cause, and affording me the opportunity to address you at this important event. Supporting the Palestinian people in the first place is a humanitarian issue, and supporting of the Palestinian people means rejection of racism, occupation, and persecution. As for Arab nation, it's a matter of existence. A just and comprehensive peace is a strategic option for the Arab countries. To call for it on a just basis that is respected by existing international laws and norms and recognized by the international community. From this standpoint, the Arab Initiative was presented in accordance with the principle of land for peace, which calls for the establishment of the Palestinian state on the borders of June 4th, 1967, with the East Jerusalem as its capital, and the return of the Palestinian refugees and the withdrawal from the occupied Golan Heights. Israel's intransigence in granting Palestinians their legitimate rights, trying to impose the status quo, and fleeing forward to make a false peace will not end the conflict, nor will it nullify rights or weaken the desire for struggle. In conclusion, we always proud to say, and I will repeat also, what His Excellency, as ever living South African icon President Nelson Mandela said, South Africa independence will not be completed until Palestine is liberated. On behalf of the Arab group, I extend my sincere thanks to the leadership, the government, and the people of South Africa for their unwavering and unlimited support for the Palestine cause. Palestine will triumph. That is our trust in God. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, His Excellency, for a very good short solidarity speech. Just a short announcement. Also, the Dean of the African Ambassadors, His Excellency, who was supposed to grace this event with his presence, unfortunately could no longer make it due to the change of dates, but they are aware of this and they have sent their message to the Embassy of Palestine. The former General Secretary of the SACC, former Director General in the Presidency, currently the Vice President of the SACC, South African Council of Churches. He is the moderator of the Churches Commission on International Affairs of the World Council of Churches. He is also an author of several books. Reverend Frank Chikane has never shied away on solidarity with Palestine. Today, he graced his presence and here to share with us the message from the WCC, from the World Council of Churches, from the South African Council of Churches, and from himself as a person who has always showed that Palestine should be free as South Africa has been free. Reverend Frank Chikane, please come close.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the issues of protocol have been dealt with, and I just want to recognize the Ambassador of the State of Palestine in South Africa. We're pleased to be with you here, to be in solidarity with you, and the resident coordinator of the United Nations, our Deputy Minister of the Department of International Affairs and Cooperation, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs from Lesotho, Kwana, Basotho, Lefatshe la Basotho, and the Ambassador of Sultanate of Amman. Thank you for being with us. Our comrade Mohammed Desai, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. I would like to start by expressing our condolences to His Excellency's Saeb Erakat's family. And we worked with him for many years, and would like you to convey our condolences to the family. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this workshop for African and Arab ambassadors accredited to the Republic of South Africa in commemoration of the United Nations International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. I speak here, and I need to clarify this because I wear different hats, and each hat has a particular policy on Palestine. And so I speak here as the moderator of the Churches Commission on International Affairs of the World Council of Churches. The moderator deals with conflict situations and challenging shit. I mean, the CCIA, the commission, deals with conflict situations globally. And so we go to all the places where there are conflicts and wars to try to make peace. I also speak as an advisor. We have an advisory committee of the All Africa Conference of Churches, which focuses on security and peace on the African continent. And then as vice president of the South African Council of Churches. And I would like to say in general, the global family of churches throughout the world and through its ecumenical structures and institutions have always acted in solidarity with the people of Palestine over many years. Except, of course, I've learned from the recent elections in the United States a new language. We talk a lot here in South Africa about different narratives. But I learned from the United States that there are people who belong to different universes. You know, there are people within the churches who belong to another universe that does not act in solidarity, and it's part of our challenge. I would like to say that we have supported the Palestinians because of the illegal occupation of their land and the people, and for having been robbed of their human rights and the right of self-determination for more than half a century. We keep on counting the number of years they have been occupied. Through our ecumenical office in Jerusalem and the many organizations that monitor the situation in Palestine, Israel, 24 hours, 7 days, all the time. We get occurrence reports about every part of the occupied areas, which speaks to the daily pain and suffering of Palestinians whose rights are violated daily. With many in detention, I read of the number of children every day who are in detention and who are kept there without any trial. We read also of people who are killed without any form of justice. The WCC has an ecumenical accompaniment program in Palestine and Israel we call IEP. We send people from different parts of the world to be in the occupied areas, to be in solidarity with people practically on the ground and accompany them as they go through their struggles. I thought I must give this background so we know where we start from. And the last time I visited Israel, Palestine, in 2015, a Palestinian business person invited us to go and share a meal in his restaurant. And we spent 2 hours with him. And the one thing I remember about what he said to me in 2015 is that I was born occupied. I'm 48 years, I'm still occupied. And I'll die occupied because the world does not care. And I've taken that message, and since 2016, I've decided, when I became a moderator of this commission, I decided I don't want to be God. Because if you receive the reports we receive every day about the pain, you can't sleep peacefully. I am surprised that the global community can let this go on daily without any meaningful intervention. I don't understand it. I don't understand how the global community can let this go on daily without any meaningful intervention or even sleep peacefully whilst the pain continues. But I've come to understand, as I study history, that this is not the first time. That's how the world behaves. We had slavery for many centuries, and people were brutalized. It's not called genocide, but go and study what happened to the Africans who were carried in ships into the Americas. How many died, and how many still don't know where their forefathers came, mothers came from. We had any colonial system, nobody cared. We lived with it. In this global community of today, we have unequal governance architecture at the pinnacle of international governance systems, with powerful countries allowed to violate the rule of law at will and at any time they wish to, whilst enforcing the same rule of law against the less powerful. You can see how the business of the United Nations works. If you are poor and weak, you are made to comply with international law and international governance systems. If you are powerful, you can do what you like. But I have also understood, that this world has got extraordinary capacity to live with it, like it lived with slavery, lived with colonialism, and lives with the pain of Palestinians for many years. This is the world we need to change, and that's really the message I would like to share. This world we must change and ensure that justice, that is indivisible justice as Martin Luther King defined it. We must make sure it prevails. It can't be justice for one group of people and and injustice for others. If we recalibrate ourselves and return to the vision of the founders of the United Nations, where, by the way, the Churches Commission on International Affairs was part of it. The Churches Commission was formed in 1946 because of the crisis of the two world wars. And it was part of the conferences that gave birth to the United Nations. We have an office in New York of the CCIA, which is part of the non-governmental entities. I call on you that we return back to the vision of those who formed the United Nations to make sure there's no war again. But we live with war, we live with brutalization of people. If this recalibration of the international governance architecture was achieved, the illegal occupation of Palestine would end immediately, because it can't be permissible. It's just not permissible. And peace between the Palestinians and the Jews will be guaranteed. It's simple. You just end the injustice and there's peace between them. But if we continue on this trajectory, the current trajectory, and that's where I want to end, we are following and allowing the belligerent Israeli position of annexation slowly of large parts of Palestine as per the recognized borders. It means of 1967 are shrinking, and we're ending up with one country. So I just want to share from the church's perspective, because we are on the ground, the credibility of the two-state solution is fading away. It's going. Because you can't occupy the majority, the greater part of Palestine, and still have a two-state position. One cannot, when I grew up, program director, learning English, I was told you can't have the cake and eat it, and I never understood it. Because I mean, the cake is meant to be eaten in any way. But there's no way in which you can annex and occupy Palestinian territories and build settlements there and still talk two-state solutions. It's not going to be possible. Soon, it's not going to be possible. And this is what we are hearing on the ground, that if you don't intervene now to stop what is happening now, we're going to have a fait accompli. And in that one state, there will have to be justice for all and equally applied amongst them. You can't have an apartheid society. I've been there. I don't have to be told about it. It's an apartheid society. At a WCC level, just to differentiate, they decided they will apply sanctions related to the occupation of Palestinian territories. That anything that comes from there, produced from there, is unacceptable because it's an illegal operation. At the SACC level, it's comprehensive sanctions. I was surprised in July this year. I mean, took a resolution to say this thing is not working. We have experienced it in South Africa. The only way is to apply comprehensive sanctions against those who are violating the rights of people. My call to the African and Arab ambassadors and the countries, it's for a decisive action to end the pain of Palestinians in the occupied areas and those who have been forced into exile. I believe that it should be possible for the African and Arab states to take this non-violent, we're not asking for more, just non-violent action to stop this pain. and we can do it. If we don't, the consequences are ghastly to contemplate. Thank you.
They say I'm quite tall. Thank you. Thank you very much, Reverend Chikane. As always, you always challenge us. I'm one of those who have been challenged by your pushings to make sure that as South Africans, we stand firm in terms of what we say towards Palestine. Her Excellency, Mrs. Nados, I understand you have another commitment. We thank you for gracing us with your presence and making sure that the UN is well represented. Thank you again for making sure that you are here, and thank you very much for making sure that the message has been sent across. She will be leaving us in the next few minutes. Please allow her to do so. She is excused. The Kingdom of Lesotho has taken a firm and bold stand amongst the other kingdoms in making sure that they stand with Palestine. Israel has several times approached the Kingdom of Lesotho, but as South Africa and Africa for Palestine, we welcome your firm stand and your firm standing point of standing with justice and showing solidarity to the Palestinians. His Excellency, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations of Kingdom of Lesotho, Mr. Mufumubi, please grace us with your solidarity speech.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Her Excellency Hannah Njara, Deputy Minister Alvin, Ambassador Salim Ali Al-Sakawi, Ambassador of the Sultanate of Oman, Ambassador Sultan Al-Ari, Ambassador of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, High Commissioner Bereng, the UN Resident Coordinator, all ambassadors and high commissioners present here today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular honor and privilege to address this august gathering with the ultimate aim of expressing support for our fellow brothers and sisters of the state of Palestine. I'm indeed optimistic that this session will reinvigorate our conviction to stand behind the Palestinian people as they are tirelessly fight for their inalienable right to independence and self-determination. The government of the people of the Kingdom of Lesotho
are concerned by the prevailing situation regarding the illegal occupation and continued colonization of Palestine by the State of Israel. The Kingdom of Lesotho is absolutely troubled by the unabated and indiscriminate killings and destruction of property of innocent Palestinians. Suffice it to underscore that there is no accountability and redress for victims of grave violations of international humanitarian and human rights in the occupied territories. The continued illegal blockade on the Gaza Strip subjects the residents there to collective punishment and entrenched humanitarian crisis. There exists restriction of freedom of movement of Palestinians in the occupied territories through blockades and checkpoints. Lesotho aligns herself with all resolutions and decisions adopted by the Organization of African Unity, which is the AU now, and the United Nations General Assembly on the situation in Palestine and the Middle East, which reiterate full support to the Palestinian people in their legitimate struggle against occupation under the leadership of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. These resolutions and decisions reaffirm the African Union's support for the peaceful resolution of the conflict in Palestine in accordance with the principles of international law and all United Nations relevant resolutions, which guarantee the establishment of an independent state of Palestine on the borders of June 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital. Ladies and gentlemen, the foregoing resonates very well with Lesotho's support for a two-state solution, with the two countries coexisting side by side with each other, with absolute peace and security as well as respectful of territorial integrity of each other. Lesotho is indeed among numerous countries that call for cessation of all settlement activities, release Palestinian prisoners in Israel jails, and arbitrary arrest of Palestinians, including women and children, which is a violation of international laws and human rights norms, including the Geneva Convention on Rights of Women and Children. Chairperson, allow me, in the interest of time, to conclude by reiterating that the UN has a duty to intensify its pursuit for decolonization of Palestine in a quest to systematically alleviate the plight of the people of Palestine, more so when the world is faced with the COVID-19 pandemic, which practically acts as a silent and deadlier killer the world has ever seen. This scenario on its own signifies the unstable need for unity, with particular focus on immediate neighbors. In this regard, the Kingdom of Lesotho vows to hold on her principled position regarding colonization of one state by another. It is uncalled for that in the 20th century, the world still witnesses remnants of colonialism, while globalization is the order of the day. Climate change keeps us on our feet, and last but not least, pandemics such as COVID-19 threaten extinction of human race. With these few words, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. South Africans, especially whenever we are crying or we are happy or wherever we are, we always grace it with a dance and a song. Master KG took us to the heights and took the Jerusalem dance to the world. Today, we are talking about the Jerusalem dance. Everywhere you go, you find people dancing to the Jerusalem dance. And I look at them when it first came out that now they are doing the Jerusalem dance, and I was thinking, I wonder if they know the Jerusalem that they are talking about. But keep that aside. Now, we will watch and take it from Master KG, the Jerusalem dance. Shamsan, meaning two sons in Arabic, does an innovative collaborative project with Palestine that focuses on youth and children in particular. Some of the most successful include some Shamsan Children of Palestine calendar, international speaking tours of children like Ahmed Tamimi, who was once present at a very young age, and a young girl who was very brave. And Shana Jihad, to advocate on issues like child prisoner issue and ongoing violations against minors. Shamsan is currently working with the artist of Jerusalem, the Globe hit song by Master KG, as I've said. Plans are underway to have Master KG and Nomcebo to visit Jerusalem in Palestine. In the new year, they are working with arts organizations in Palestine. This dance challenge video with 130 dancers from Gaza, Bethlehem, Jenin, Ramallah is going to be inspirational. Please enjoy it as we enjoy it in South Africa and in the globe, the Jerusalem dance.
Io non lo sé, tu appena la buona, 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 buona. Io non lo sé, tu appena.
Thank you. I'm surprised there were no moves in the room. You can't sit and observe to that wonderful song. It moved around the world, and it's still moving, but gracefully so, moving in Bethlehem, in Jenin, in Ramallah, in Jerusalem, and all cities of the West Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to all the speakers, but I'm sure we are sitting there and we have listened and we have questions amongst ourselves that we need to pose, or we have concerns that we need to take over to the speakers or to the embassies, the different embassies that have shared their solidarity messages. At this time, I will open up the floor if there are any questions or concerns towards the Embassy of Palestine, towards the Kingdom of Lesotho, towards the Embassy of Oman, towards the Embassy of South Africa and the Republic at large in South Africa. Whatever that is sitting within us that we need to clear before we leave the room, because it's not just for us to sit and listen, but I'm sure there are people who are having a little bit of concerns in terms of, as much as all this has been said, what are we planning to do with all the messages that we have received from the different embassies and places and kingdoms? The floor is open for a few questions. Please be short with your question and direct, and tell us if you direct it to any of the embassies or to a particular person so that they answer correctly. It's time for questions and answers. I will take the first 5 from this side. 1. Is there any other one from this side? Or this side? Okay, we have the first question. I'm sure it will come up earlier. Do we have mic, a roving? Oh, there's a roving mic. Sorry, it's right here in the front.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. This is the ambassador of Egypt in South Africa. And it's very heartening after all those decades from celebrating their solidarity with Palestine to see this kind of vital support for the Palestinian people. Needless to say that Egypt was at the forefront many decades ago in its support of the Palestinian cause. We fought 5 wars with Israel, 1948, 56, 67, 367, 73, and 73. And in parts, we lost parts of our land in our fight for that cause, and we fought to regain our land again. And then we try to also to achieve through peace what we fail to achieve through wars. And as such, I not only salute the presence of all our colleagues here, but I also salute the efforts by South Africa. Thank you, South Africa, for Jerusalem, because perhaps through culture, we may be able to achieve in part what we failed to achieve by war and even through our peace efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Very true. As I've said before the Jerusalem dance, that in South Africa, wherever we are, whether we are laughing, whether we are crying, it is expressed through song or a dance. Culture has made us to be where we are today. Any other concern or question for clarity? We have one.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation, for the speeches. First overwhelming, and we learned a lot today. I know that we want to ask questions, but I have questions to Mr. Muhammad regarding 46% disinvestment or like loss in FDIs in Israel. Can you elaborate on this a bit? Which years you are talking about and how exactly it's happened?
Okay, Mohammed.
Thanks so much, Ambassador of Lebanon. I think that the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement probably reached its height, one of its greatest heights, just post 2015, 2016. This is a similar period in which the investigation by the UN took place. And you are quite correct. It was 46% drop in foreign direct investment. And in that period, I think one of the greatest inspirations that we saw was that at the forefront of the BDS campaign, the Boycott of Israel campaign, and the Palestine solidarity more generally was young Jewish students on US campuses who were probably the directors behind some of the greatest successes that we saw in that period. And I think that for us, this is an important message because we really are excited about working with such Jewish groups. We do have such groups in South Africa. I think Reverend Chikani and others have been working with them, and we do hope to mimic the same sort of successes that we've seen in the United States here in South Africa. Subsequent to the UN report that documented the drop in FDI, we also know that the United Nations itself has produced a list of just over 112 companies that have operations in the illegal Israeli settlements. And this here ties in with what, again, the Reverend Chikane had indicated, that the World Council of Churches has adopted a position of not doing any business with any company involved in the illegal Israeli occupation. And this is important because these companies, whether they are French-based or whether they're German-based, whether they're South African-based, they can be at the center of litigation because of their involvement in illegal activity, and that being the Israeli settlements. I hope that's provided something.
Thank you, Mohammed. I have one more question here. Can we please show me by a show of hands if there will be any more, at least 2 more questions before the vote of thanks? Okay, you can.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Ambassador of Tunisia Majesty. First, I would like to congratulate Ambassador Hanan, my best friend here in South Africa, for this event, and also to recognize this huge support of South Africa to Palestine all over all these years, but also especially in the Security Council. And my question is to Deputy Minister Arvin Kudes. since South Africa is inaugurating tomorrow her second presidency of the UN Security Council, and by this presidency will be concluding the South African term mandate, or tenure in UN Security Council. What is your say about this tenure, and will there be anything specific to Palestine? Because today is, let's say 29th is Solidarity Day, and the first you are having the inauguration of the presidency. Maybe you can tell us if there will be something specific about Palestine. And in this occasion also, I would like to congratulate very sincerely and deeply the South Africa mandate in Security Council. It was really huge support to African issues, to women in Africa issues, and to the core issues of course for us, African and Arab, the Palestine cause and the Palestine question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador from Tunisia. I think it's quite an important issue that you raise, and I just don't want to respond to just your key question, but to respond to your broad concern. I think when I started, ladies and gentlemen, I took you into confidence on the four what we call concentric pillars, or circles that guides and informs our policy positions in South Africa. And one of it, of course, is to deepen cooperation on multilateralism. And in that work, Your Excellencies, the reform of the UN is the apex multilateral organization is key and paramount. And we will continue to champion the Africa's Group's resolution as it relates to the reform of the United Nations Security Council. And we have at our disposal the Eswelweni consensus and the Surti declaration, which amongst others advocate for a permanent representation of Africa on the UN Security Council. I think it is our submission as South Africa that we cannot continue to have only 5 members of the global world in a permanent capacity, and you continue to have a rotation of what is called the P10 that complements the role of your P5. Of course, the deeper policy dilemma that the UN Security Council should be seized with is the nature, the character of its veto vote. Because when we speak about solidarity with the Palestinian people, we speak about the fact that fortunately the UN Security Council has consistently and evidently taken decisions which frown upon the conduct of the Israeli state as it relates to the plight, self-determination of the Palestinian people is concerned. But the biggest outcry today in the in the global south and generally in the world is the reluctance of the UN Security Council actually to act in some of those pronouncements. And it is our position as South Africa, as part of the African group, and we have raised that consistently during our tenure, 2-year tenure of the UN Security Council, that becomes key and critical if we want to build a better world and if we want to construct a world that is based on equity and social justice. So our presidency that starts on the 1st of December will be informed by those considerations amongst others. And I can take this gathering into privilege that indeed the question that relates to the plight of the Palestinian people will find prominence during our tenure, as will be the plight of all nations and all people that face challenges as it relates to self-determination. And in our own mind, we are also faced with a key and critical challenge as it relates to the plight of the people living in Western Sahara and the challenges and the continued engagements that needs to take place via the African Union, of course, with the Kingdom of Morocco. The respect for your sovereign integrity as it relates to the Bolivarian people of Venezuela, the importance of making sure that the joint comprehensive peace agreement that relates to Iran takes place, the unfortunate extraordinary sanctions declarations as it relates to the people of Cuba. Those are some of the profound and consistent matters that will characterize our presidency as we conclude our term during the period of December 2020, ladies and gentlemen. So I just thought that apart from the initial question, that I think it's important to substantively provide certainty that we want our foreign policy to be more predictable as South Africa, based on our past experiences, positive and negatively, having served as a significant member of the United Nations Security Council. Of course, there's a number of other countries, in particular Kenya, will assume the role that we have played in 2021. Kenya, we regard is a strategic African partner also, ladies and gentlemen. I think all of us know and appreciate that Kenya holds the chairpersonship of the Organization of African, Caribbean, Pacific States, the old ACP. And because of their own experiences, having been also a victim of terrorism, I think Kenya will continue to, with the two other African states that occupies the UN Security Council seats next year, will continue to execute the positions of the African group. And I think that for us is key and critical. What must be significant is that our foreign policy dispositioning sees South Africa as a central part of being an African state. So the future, this inclusive future of that we speak about of 2063, and a better South Africa that we want to build in 2030 cannot be separated from the plight of any and all of the African states. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. I see there are no more questions, so I thank all the speakers for making sure that the message gets across very well. Are you raising your hand?
For a final remark.
Okay, okay. Please, Ambassador.
I almost closed your eyes. Am I violating protocol?
No. I always do believe that rules were put to be broken.
Of course.
Yes. But since we are talking in an occasion for the UN, and since we were talking about the passing of our chief negotiator, Saeb Arikat, and since we are talking about the South Africa presiding the UN Security Council, I find myself obliged to say a message that UN should really now working with us and with all the peace-loving forces and nations and governments to recognize Palestine as a full member state. On the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, we do believe that we should work together on building on the resolution. I do. It's working? Yes. As I was, the microphone has been, yes. I do believe that we should work. No, maybe I can have it. Yeah. It's a final note after all. Okay. Yes. Yes. In this context, I do believe that we should build on Resolution 67 on 19 of the year 2015, when the National Committee, headed by Dr. Saeb Arikat, managed to upgrade Palestine as a non-member observer state at the United Nations General Assembly. I do believe that we should build on the legacy of the late Saeb Arikat, and we should build on the legacy of the UN itself, and we should request our friends in the Security Council, and we should request our friends all over the world to support us in our endeavor to get a full-fledged member to become the UN General Assembly. I think that taking into consideration all what's happening now, we do believe that Palestinians deserve more than just a symbolic annual or festive message or international exhibition or conference of solidarity. We need to be fully recognized at the UN. I do believe this is only just one small part of recognizing our rights of self-determination and sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. It was one of the most important messages that you had to break the rules. Now we are almost at the end of our program, but we cannot end the note without saying thank you. And to grace us with that, Mr. Ismail Issau, the Director of the Middle East in the Department of International Relations. Can you please come forward and give us a vote of thanks? Mr. Ismail.
Yeah. Good day, everybody. Good day. It's is it on? Is it fine? Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. I would like to give our program director, Mr. Studio Masango, a big round of applause for admirable task. Thank you. Your Excellency, Ambassador Hannah Jara, Your Excellencies, Deputy Minister Buertas, Your Excellency, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom and of Lesotho, Mr. Mohamedi, Excellencies, Ambassadors, members of the Diplomatic Corps, honorable speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, and also to the members of the media. Allow me to have the special honor on behalf of our hosts, the Embassy of the State of Palestine and its partners, the Department of Arts and Culture, the United Nations Center in Pretoria, and DIRCO, to convey our profound gratitude to the speakers for their insightfulness, and also the distinguished guests who have taken time out of their many responsibilities in having joined us on this symbolic day to mark the 43rd International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, and in making this workshop a success. This is through friendship, partnership, and solidarity in action. We are certainly honored and very fortunate to have some eminent persons who have blessed this gathering with their presence and significant input. The messages conveyed along the theme of the workshop and the video we have seen provides further impetus with a strong desire to work towards a solution to the Palestinian cause, and reflects the groundswell of international concern in favor of an urgent restoration of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. Our deliberations here today reflected the richness of the expertise in making that desired difference and to assume our collective responsibility to advance a political solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and not to lose any sense of connection and empathy. This commemoration of this day is symbolic of the international community's firm and ambiguous rejection of Israel's continued intransigence and persistently aggressive, ruthless, and humane actions aimed at further denying the Palestinian people their basic rights, including the right of their own homeland. The mindless cycle of destruction must end. The virtuous circle of peace must begin, and once again inspire global action towards the achievement of a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to liberate the Palestinian people. With these remarks, I'd like to conclude and to extend our gratitude once again to all the presenters, guests who have traveled from near and far to have honored this event. Last but not least, we'd like to submit our great enjoyment for the magnificent entertainment for the Shamsha Jerusalem dance. Thanks for that welcoming performance and further making this workshop a memorable one. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ishmael. Before we leave the room, I have just two more announcements. It's good to be a program director because you can always move people around. We have one more thing before lunch. We do have lunch to be served, but before that, I request everyone that we are going to have a photo session with the two deputy ministers here in the front. Deputy Minister, are we doing the photo session with the masks on? I was pulling your leg. Yes. So we'll have just the photo session with the two deputy ministers, with everyone here in the front. And Hasuna, are we?
First, the ambassadors, deputy minister, and all honorable guests.
And then before the photo session, I have. Pardon? Yes. Before the photo session, as we prepare ourselves for the photo session, just powder ourselves, ladies, to look nice in the photo. We have a couple of gifts that we would love to thank the ambassadors and the speakers that were here from the Embassy of Palestine and Africa for Palestine. Please, can Her Excellency.
Could you join us to present the gifts to our honorable speakers?
Okay.
Deputy Minister Khalif, please, would you join us? Please,